Yeah.
Hi, Pam.
Everybody's in. I'm in. Tech support puppy is in. We had a little unscheduled run outside. But, and he may make another appearance here. He's a little excited tonight. I'm not sure why. Something in the air. Maybe the heat's getting to him. I don't know. But we have all kinds of fun lined up for you. So I'm just going to let him do his puppy thing. And if he joins us, well, it'll be a surprise for all of us. Anyway, welcome to another really jam-packed evening of Good-Natured Hour, everyone. You know what? I'm going to do away with all the niceties. We're just going to get going. So we got a lot
Pam, hi. Mary Tebow here. I just want to make sure I don't forget. There is a National Geographic article about the insects. If anybody has seen it, it's phenomenal. You'll miss them when they're gone. It is a whole article, and I just wanted to make sure people saw it. It's got all the insects that, here, hold on. I just wanted to see. Yeah, probably you could get it at the library. It's the August edition of the National Geographic. I wouldn't have paid attention if it wasn't for your class. Let's see. So I wanted to just plug that in real fast, okay?
Oh, yeah, Mary, let me make a note of that. Maybe.
Yeah, it's the National Geographic, let's see, I think it's the August edition. And it said, the article is, you'll miss them when they're gone. And it's a phenomenal scientific, I don't understand a lot of it, but it's for you to review, okay?
That's why we're here. We're the interpreters.
Yeah, here, this is see all these bugs. There's 4 pages of all these bugs, and it says. So there you go.
Is the gist of it, Mary, that we're because I've heard the term insect apocalypse. Is kind of the gist of the article? Is that we're losing?
Well, you know what? I've been trying to plug through this. This is sometimes this stuff is high level for me. Okay. Where have all the insects gone? Is the title. So it's really, and I don't know, if you don't get the National Geographic, the library has it, but you can't get it now. So anyway, that's it. That's all I have to say.
That's so sobering. And you know what? We'll actually touch on that with a couple of slides that we have tonight, a little experience I had earlier in the week. I tell you, you go into, whether it's a big box store like a Home Depot or Menards, or even our smaller hardware stores, and of course online, and you see all these insecticides, and they use this, what I find a very scary term of broad spectrum. And to the common homeowner person, who's dealing with something unwanted, whether it's a wasp nest under the eaves or what they feel are too many spiders or millipedes or whatever it happens to be, people tend to grab the can that's going to kill the most because they figured they don't want anything around. Pest control firms, there's some that are a little more environmentally conscious than others, but there's this prevailing attitude that the only good bug is a dead bug. And we've been hearing this for a while, and I should have taken a picture the other night. Maybe I can grab one before next week. I was out every Sunday I spend with my mom, and we go try to get her out in the car, and we try to drive around a little bit, and I usually incorporate a few errands. Well, week before last, it was dark out, and I'd gone to the grocery store, and Mom stayed in the car, and I brought out ice cream for us. And so we were sitting in the car eating our ice cream, and I was looking up at the lights because I thought, oh, this would be fun. Maybe there's sometimes you get lucky and you'll see, besides all the little bugs flying around, you'll see something larger like a katydid or a moth. There were no bugs under these lights. And my hope is that the lights are of a spectrum that bugs don't find attractive, but I don't know. Insects have been flying to lights for as long as we've, pretty much as long as we've had them. And even before we had electricity, that term a moth to a flame, insects are attracted to light at night, and I didn't see any. And there's also been, lots of anecdotal reports, people reporting that they don't have as many bugs smeared on their windshields when they drive around at night. You don't have bugs on the grill of your car the way they used to. I think we are getting to a point where things are getting serious. And it doesn't just affect the insect population, it affects everything that eats insects, which is a lot of things. Other bugs eat bugs, birds eat bugs, other things eat birds. A lot of insects that we don't even recognize as pollinators are out there making our flowers grow, turning our flowers into fruits and nuts and other seeds so that we get more plants. It is a serious thing, Mary. So I'm going to check this out, and we'll put this into next week's gathering. Let's see what else I can find out, because what has really been kind of lacking is the hard data, and then of course the media's interest in it, because a lot of times the news that we hear is just what people want to hear. And again, the prevailing attitude that the only good bug is a dead bug, we might end up without any bugs and we'll be in serious trouble. So thanks, Mary, for that tip. I will check that out, and we'll put that on the list for next week's things to cover. So let's tell you what, let's get going with tonight. And we are going to touch a little bit on this topic, maybe 2/3 of the way through tonight's program. Let me just pull up our file for tonight. And we'll get this started at the beginning.
Oh. Oh.
I show this part every week. I keep meaning to refer to each one of these photos as we go through the starting lineup, but that'll have to wait till another night. Let's get started with tonight's show. I don't know if any of you are like me. You got a little touch of the ragweed allergy, but my goodness, we've had a time of it. Ragweed is in full bloom. Our eyes are watering, our noses are itchy. And I thought it was time to write about this plant, and boy, did I find out a lot of interesting things. Now in our area, we've got a couple of different types of ragweed. We've got the giant ragweed, which is well named. Giant ragweed can grow 7 or 8 feet tall. Ambrosia trifida is the Latin name for that. I always like to delve into why things got the names that they did. I haven't found a real good connection for why a plant of ragweed's reputation earned the name ambrosia, the food of the gods, but that's what it is. Ambrosia trifida is the giant ragweed. Trifida refers to the leaves. I actually took this picture a couple of weeks ago because I was trying to figure out what insect had laid, speaking of bugs, had laid its eggs on this ragweed leaf. But, well, this is a great example of, it shows how trifida refers to the tri-lobed leaf, the 3 points on the giant ragweed's leaf. So you see this growing, you see it growing on roadsides, you see it next to ag fields. You also see it, interestingly enough, in a lot of our natural areas. It is a native plant, but it tends to grow in the more disturbed areas. So if you're walking, last weekend before last, we did our King County Certified Naturalist prairie field trip, and we were at Dick Young Forest Preserve, and we were at the part of the forest preserve that's you enter off of Main Street in Batavia, and there's a wonderfully diverse prairie there. They've done a fantastic job of starting to restore the old ag fields there, the corn and soybean fields, bringing them back to the prairie that they once were. But all along a lot of the trails where the ground is more disturbed, where they have to mow to maintain the trails. You see a lot of giant ragweed. You hear a lot of people sneezing. We also have the common ragweed or annual ragweed, and this is a shorter version of ragweed. It's got the same genus name, ambrosia. Our Artemisifolia refers to Artemisia, which is the word, the other name for wormwood, which you might recognize as the plant that absinthe, the liqueur absinthe is distilled from. So there is some resemblance between the common ragweed leaf and the wormwood leaf. The picture though here, you can see it's growing again along a disturbed area. This is a sidewalk, actually right by Thompson Middle School. And as much as this plant makes me sneeze and makes my eyes water, I've got to admire its resilience because they mow it frequently and it still manages to flower and bloom. And it's those flowers that cause seasonal allergy sufferers like myself to have a problem. The flower is, you can see, this is the flower here. It's fairly, nondescript. It's green. It doesn't really scream, come and pollinate me the way some of our showier wildflowers do. And the reason it doesn't need to attract pollinators is because a lot of that pollen is distributed in the wind. So you can see how this kind of comes around. Tiny, tiny little grains of pollen are dispersed in the wind and they land on other ragweed plants and we get more ragweed. But they don't just land, if it only landed on ragweed, we'd all be fine. But because it's in the wind, it's landing a lot of different places, including our faces and in our noses and in our eyes. And those tiny little grains of pollen are what our bodies react to. Now, before we get more into the pollen, I mentioned in the column that I wrote last week that ragweed is actually cultivated, not so much the common ragweed, but the giant ragweed. Those, the flowers' mission in life is to get pollinated and turn into seeds for the next generation of plants. Well, that seed that is produced by the ragweed is really important to a lot of our overwintering songbirds, American tree sparrows, dark-eyed juncos, our finches, some of the woodpeckers even will forage on those seeds. So will game birds. So you'll see giant ragweed actually kind of conserved and cultivated in natural areas, a lot of state-owned property that is managed for game bird populations. So bobwhite quail will feed on that. Pheasants will feed on the seeds of giant ragweed. So it's kind of a, I won't even say necessary evil because it's not an evil plant. It's just our reaction to it that makes us sometimes not a fan. So this is the pollen grain that we're talking about, and this is magnified, oh gosh, I don't know, a few thousand times. They are microscopic, tiny little grains because remember, they have to be carried away by the wind. But look at all these little jagged edges. You can just imagine when that gets into your system, your body's immune system is going to go after that if it feels it's a threat. Now, not everybody has that reaction. I have a friend, and some of you might remember Josh Clark. He used to work here at the St. Charles Park District. He now works at the DeKalb Forest Preserve District. Well, Josh posted this photo the other day. Josh didn't get into yellow spray paint. Josh was actually out working in one of the DeKalb Forest Preserves doing some mowing and mowing down ragweed. That yellow on his pants and actually the yellow on his tractor, that's ragweed pollen. So one plant can produce 1 million grains of pollen, and you multiply that by the thousands of ragweed plants that might be growing alongside a trail. that adds up to a lot of pollen and a lot of sneezing and a lot of itching, but also a lot of seeds for our overwintering birds. So this is true of just about everything in nature. Our human perception might make us feel as though, oh, it's bad, it's evil, we've got to get rid of it. And everything has a purpose, even ragweed. Now, with that said, ragweed does have a bit of an identity problem. And I remember, gosh, even in high school, I at that time I did not have a ragweed allergy, but several of my friends did. And I remember walking into our biology classroom and someone had brought in a big handful of goldenrod. And one of my classmates looked at that and said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. I'm so allergic to goldenrod." But they're not. Goldenrod blooms at the same time as ragweed. And it's a much showier flower because it needs to attract insects because its pollen grains are much larger. Their pollen, the pollen on the goldenrod plant can't blow away in the wind. It needs an animal, usually some sort of insect, to transport it from one goldenrod plant to another. And I thought this was kind of funny. This was on one of the photo sharing websites that we use here at the Park District. This is a goldenrod plant, unmistakable. There's no way that this could be ragweed. Yet, look how it's labeled. Ragweed, wasp, green, yellow. And so these were all the tags that this photo was given by people who are looking for. Hopefully they know enough to reject the tag of ragweed on this plant, because this is clearly goldenrod. Look at the wasps that are feeding on it. Wasps, we'll get to this again in a few more slides. Wasps have a terrible reputation. I mentioned it last week. Everybody looks at wasps as the stingers. They are a little bit more prone to stinging. The social wasps are anyway. They can sting multiple times. A honeybee, when it stings, its stinger remains in your skin and that bee dies. So it's not going to continue to sting. Although if you do get stung by a honeybee, you want to make sure you take your fingernail or a credit card and you get that stinger out of your skin as soon as you can, because when the honeybee flies away, the whole back portion of its abdomen gets ripped off of the bee. That's why it dies. And what's left in your skin is not just the stinger, but also venom sacs. And they will continue to pump venom into that wound until you get that stinger out. So the quicker you can remove a honeybee stinger, the less venom you'll end up with in your skin. But wasps and bumblebees, pretty much all the other things that sting, they can sting multiple times because their stinger doesn't stay in your skin. It's smooth. The honeybee's stinger is barbed, so when it goes in your skin, it stays there. These guys can sting and sting. They'll eventually run out of venom, but they have that sort of connotation, and when people see a wasp, they think, oh, it's going to sting. But they do consume a fair amount of nectar, and they're also very helpful with controlling other insects. But these wasps are certainly taking advantage of the bounty that we have here in the goldenrod. Those of you who buy local honey, you might have noticed that different beekeepers will label their the honeys that they make based on where the hives are. Some people specialize in clover honey. If you go to the store and you buy non-local honey, you can get orange blossom honey. When the nectar that makes up that honey is gathered from different plants, it will have a different character to it. Now, some beekeepers around here, they'll label their darker honey a fall honey because it's gathered later in the season, and those nectars are from our later blooming plants like goldenrod, and it will have a much stronger flavor to it. I'm digressing, go figure. Suffice it to say, goldenrod does not cause a seasonal hay fever allergy like some of us are experiencing right now. Its pollen grains are just too large. Got it? Good. Let's move on here. So we're gonna try and make a smooth transition from ragweed and tiny pollen grains to, what else? Carrion beetles. A few weeks ago, we held our final week of nature camp. It was the first week of August, and you might recognize the surface in the background. That's a picnic table. We had some of our camp kids out at the Hickory Knolls Natural Area Pavilion. We were gonna, I think they were working on their journals while we were sitting at the tables. Of course, they were having their snacks, and we were all socially distanced. And I looked at, I was at my table by myself, and I looked down, I go, oh, I'm not alone. There was a carrion beetle. So you can see these guys are pretty distinctive looking. This happens to be an American carrion beetle. When you find a carrion beetle, you know you're not too far from something dead. Now, unfortunately, because of my duties as a camp counselor, I couldn't go off and search for the dead thing. And I didn't smell it, so I don't know how far this bug traveled. They can fly. Remember, beetles are members of the order Coleoptera, which means sheath wing. And Optera, ptera, the last part of that word means the wing, and cole means sheath. And these wings have a kind of a, almost a leathery coating, but then underneath they've got the thin wings that they use for their powered flight. So for whatever reason, this carrion beetle had left the dead thing and landed on the picnic table where I found it and thought, you know, more people need to know about these things. Now, this is a photo of carrion beetles at work. This is a garter snake on a local trail. Garter snake is the dead thing in this picture, and the carrion beetles are doing what they do best, which is they want to lay their eggs on the carcass. Those eggs hatch and turn into little beetle larvae, and those larvae feed on the carcass. Now, it's a messy job, but somebody's got to do it. We tend to think of flies as being, you know, around dead things, and they're doing the same thing. They're laying their eggs, and their little larvae are known as maggots, another lovely word, and those maggots will feed on the carcass. Now, if you remember from last week's program, we mentioned that we would talk about carrion beetles and that they were kind of like nature's Uber. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Carrion beetles oftentimes will have these little hitchhikers on them. Here's an American carrion beetle with mites. Now, again, our human perspective, we don't want to be walking around with mites, even though we are, and we don't realize it. Our skin, there's all kinds of tiny little things that we can't see on our bodies, live in our bedding and feed on our skin flakes, and I won't belabor that point, but mites are a fact of life, and a lot of them are very, very helpful. Now, in the case of this, we're going to call these, I don't know the species of this mite, we're just going to call them Phoretic mites. Phorecy is a process, it's a word that means, it kind of means hitchhiker. These are mites that really have no way of getting to where they need to go by themselves. So they need to catch a ride on something that can get to where they need to go. So these mites will hop on top of a carrion beetle. And in this case, we're talking about American carrion beetles. We've got, I think, at least three different kinds of carrion beetles in our area. Some are a little more brightly colored with orange markings, and some are almost all black. But they need to get to the carcass so that their next generation can come to be. The mites need the same thing. So it's like, you know, getting on a Greyhound or maybe a, you know, 747 777, one of those big jumbo planes. And they hitch a ride to something that's dead. And in return, what they do is they hop off and get into the meat of the matter, shall we say. But they will feed on the eggs that are laid by the flies that are also visiting the dead thing. So by feeding on the eggs of the flies, they're reducing the competition for that carcass that the carrion beetles babies would experience if the fly eggs were allowed to stay. Now, some eggs are gonna survive. We're gonna have maggots and we're gonna have beetle larvae. We're gonna have all kinds of things going on that dead thing. But it's a really neat thing, and they're actually somewhat visible. Now, this is a magnified, pretty magnified photo. A carrion beetle is maybe the size of a dime, a little bit larger than a dime, almost the size of a nickel. But you can actually see these mites with your bare eyes if your eyes are good enough, or if you put your reading glasses on, increase your chances. I know I always take my glasses off and I can see them. But phoretic mites are just a part of life for our local carrion beetles. And our carrion beetles are nature's Uber, giving them a ride to where they need to go. So we saw the dead garter snake in that last photo. We'll be talking about garters again in another program very soon. But a lot of people have been telling me they're seeing brown snakes these days. And brown snakes are probably even numerous in our area than garter snakes, but they're little and they're brown, so we hardly ever see them. Steraria decay is their scientific name. Decay, you might think we're still talking about dead stuff, but Decay was actually, he was a naturalist in the 1800s. His name is D-E-K-A-Y, Decay. So some people call these decay snakes, but it has nothing to do with dead stuff. The photo on the right here, this was sent to me by my friend Elizabeth, who works for Soil and Water Conservation District here in St. Charles. And she walks regularly over at Leroy Oaks, and she said she practically stepped on this little guy in the middle of a trail. This was last week. This snake that's on the left, this was a little brown snake that we came upon during our native bee Learn from the Experts program that we did up at John Dewar Forest Preserve on August 8th. In fact, this little guy did get stepped on. A member that was in the class, it was under his boot, and luckily there was enough give to the soil underneath that the snake was fine, but we got to have a little trailside interpretive moment there, because most people don't even know we have these. They are so well camouflaged and they're so small. The female brown snakes are the larger of the two sexes of brown snakes. They get to be maybe 18 inches, 1.5 feet or so. But they're very small. You'll notice they're kind of marked like a garter, not by color, but this prominent stripe, dorsal stripe down the back. They have some markings around the eyes too that almost makes it look like they're wearing some wild mascara. They've got some dark marks around the face. But usually. You have to go looking if you want to find a brown snake or be paying close attention. Elizabeth, she's very observant. She's always looking for pollinators as she's out on her walks this time of the year. But she happened upon this brown snake. First time I ever found a brown snake was over at West Chicago Prairie, and I wasn't looking for snakes at all, which is kind of weird for me because I usually am. But it was underneath a butternut tree. Butternut trees are also known as white walnut trees. They're in the same genus, juglans, as the black walnut that we have. But butternut trees are a little bit more rare. They're susceptible to a disease that has knocked a lot of them out in this area, but we still have a few. Well, I was looking underneath in the leaf litter underneath that butternut tree to see if I could find any butternuts. And I shoved my hands, and this was, gosh, this was in November, so it was getting late in the season. It was chilly out. I pulled my hand up, and in amongst the leaves in my hand, there was a little brown snake. So that's where they tend to hang out. They're in leaf litter. Sometimes they'll be in the wood chips if you're on a trail that's chipped. They can be really hard to spot, except for a couple different times, and that is in the spring and in the fall. This was a little brown snake that I came upon. Let's see, it was early on. It was when we were still all quarantining and sheltering in place and whatever else they were telling us to do. But it was after the weather had started to warm up just a little bit. So I'm going to say this was April. I was looking at this picture, and it's kind of funny. You can tell a couple that this is, you know, we haven't been outside very much, the snake or myself. The snake has spent its winter in hibernation. It's just come out. As much as we like to think of hibernation as a nice long winter's nap, it's kind of tough, especially on cold-blooded creatures like snakes. So you can see the color is kind of dull. It's hard to see the lateral or the dorsal stripe down the back. You can kind of see the crazy eye makeup here around the eye, the darkness underneath the eye here. And this snake was maybe a foot long. You can see my hands haven't been out much either. They're looking kind of rough as well. We both had a long winter, but in the spring, they come to warm up and get their digestive system going. These snakes eat insects only. They can't capture anything larger than that. So they might eat, well, I said insects only. We'll say arthropods only, and worms, but they won't eat a baby mouse. They won't eat a fish or anything like that. They're eating the things that are down there in the leaf litter with them. So they come out in the spring, and they need to warm up enough so that they can move enough. Being cold-blooded, they need that warmth from the pavement to go after their food. So you see them on, this was the Great Western Trail out near Hanson Road, and it was just kind of chilling by the side. In fact, I sort of wondered at first if it was still alive. I thought maybe it had been hit by a bike or something, but it was warmish that day, and as I held it in my hands, it warmed up even more, and it started to move more. In the fall, they'll go out on the pavements like this for the opposite reason. Well, they still want to warm up, but rather than warming up so they can feed, they want to warm up so they can purge their system. They've got to get their digestive tract clear they've got to get any digested insects out of their gut before they go back into hibernation, because if that were to sit there and be kind of stagnating for several months, that could turn toxic and kill the snake. So they want to warm themselves up a little bit in the fall before they go underneath the ground, where they'll spend, say, November, December, January, February, March, 5, sometimes almost 6 months underneath the ground. So they want to clear their gut, warm up so they can clear their gut and spend the winter underground. So we've been seeing these, like I said, I've heard from a few people these last couple of weeks that are seeing brown snakes. So I don't know, maybe they're out looking for water. We've had a real dry spell lately, and it could be that they've come out seeking moisture, because snakes need to drink too. Now, I did have one other encounter with a brown snake, and I took this photo, and I'm wondering, anybody can see. Now, if you know me, you know that I always use my lip balm as a gauge for measurement, 2 5/8 inches. And so I put that down on the ground. And to be honest, this picture, I took this in August of 2017. And when I pulled it up for tonight's program, when I was putting the slideshow together, I thought, well, where the heck is the snake? You look real close though, you'll see something in this circle that's not much more than 2 5/8 inches. Do a little better zoom here. So this is gravel trail over, again, at John Dewar Forest Preserve in South Elgin. And this is the trail that leads back to the old quarry from the parking lot at that forest preserve. And I saw this thing squiggling along, and my first thought was, oh, it's a worm. But look at this habitat here. It's rocks. It's really compacted, crushed gravel, just a few little plants here and there, very, very dry conditions. This is not where you would find an earthworm. Oh my gosh, it's a baby brown snake. So it took me a minute to identify it, because the first thing I saw was this circle behind its behind its head. And we do have in northern Illinois, they're a little hard to find in King County, but we do have a snake called a ringneck snake. And I looked at this, I had to take my glasses off and look a little bit closer before I realized it wasn't a ringneck. It wasn't a baby ringneck, but it's a baby brown snake. As it gets larger, that ring behind its head will disappear, and that dorsal stripe will become a little bit more prominent. But we're talking about a snake that starts life at about 3 inches. So, you know, when you're grumbling about those pesky little insects that are biting, flying around, bothering you, it's the brown snake that's going to go after them. Same for tiny little worms, other tiny little slugs. All these things that we don't really give a second thought to have a really important role to play, because they're feeding our next generation of brown snakes. So now we're gonna go from snakes to poop. This was also on last week's teaser. What we're looking at there on the left is a picture of my friend Bonnie's hand. And Bonnie, I should qualify, Bonnie does not live in King County anymore. When she got married, she and her husband bought 50 acres out in Newark, Illinois, which is in Kendall County. Well, Bonnie was out walking towards the back of her property, and she came across this Mighty Big Scat. And she texted it to me, and I gotta tell you, I about fell out of my chair. Now let's look at this thing. Scat, you know, you can tell a lot about the environment that you're in by the sort of scat that you find. Scat will tell you, if you can identify the scat, you can know what animal left it there, and therefore what animal might be close by. But if you pick it apart, you can sometimes tell what the animal ate, which then gives you more information about the surrounding food chain. You might find some rabbit fur, or some bird claws, or a beak, some feathers. Lots and lots of information can be gained from scat. Different animals leave different sizes and shapes of scat. Probably the most common large scat we find around here is coyote scat. Kicking myself that I didn't put a coyote scat picture in here for comparison. I'll try to remember to do that in a subsequent meeting that we have. But coyote scat is in a lot of carnivores around here, fox too. It's very twisty. Coyote scat tends to be a little bit bigger around than your thumb. Fox scat is smaller and twisty. It tends to be more like about the size of your pinky. In fact, we talk about using a rule of thumb. If it's as big as your thumb or bigger, it's a coyote. If it's smaller than your thumb, probably a fox. But twisty, some of you may have heard me refer to the Dairy Queen squirrel. A lot of these animals will leave a very prominent swirl on the top of the scat that they leave behind. Scat for them isn't just a way to relieve themselves, it's also contains a lot of scent chemicals that other animals, if you've ever walked a dog, they head right for a big pile like that, and they want to sniff and they want to collect as much information as they can about what that animal was. Anyway, Bonnie finds this scat. You'll notice it's not twisty, it's very blocky. It's very large too. This is way bigger than even 2 thumbs put together. It's as long as her hand. Like I said, when I saw this, I about fell out of my chair. I have no doubt in my mind it was a cougar. We did contact the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. They came and collected the scat. We're waiting on confirmation that that's what it was. In fact, I'll fall out of my chair again if I find out it's not. But like I said, Bonnie doesn't live around here. She's out in a fairly remote rural area. And the properties are, like I said, they have 50 acres. They've got a farm behind them that has cattle. There's cornfields, there's bean fields, there's lots of room, and there's also a water source not nearby. Cougars do walk through our area. I'd be surprised if one came walking down the Fox River here in St. Charles, but they do use creeks and secluded waterways to move because there's less interference, less traffic, and there's also abundant food. So anyway, we're still waiting confirmation, but if you ever see a mighty big scat like this, please, please, please let me know, because we do want to stay in touch with the wildlife biologist with the state so that they can be aware of movements of these animals through this part of Illinois. Pretty cool, huh? Uh-oh. Bill and Kathy, I don't know why your pictures aren't showing. This was just a little follow-up to last week's program shoot. I don't know why they're not there. I'll bring that back next week. We'll just move on. It's a cool picture of a waxwing on the Main Street Bridge here in St. Charles. We'll leave that. We make a note of that. We'll get back to that next week. This was a little something I ran into in my ramblings around town. This is actually not too far off of Prairie Street. I think this is 8th Street here in St. Charles. I was walking the dogs and I come on this, a Good Samaritan has warned the neighbors that there are bees in this area. Well, let's think about this. Do bees live in the ground? Our bumblebees can, but I don't know. This is the Parkway. In fact, this is what I saw when I went over to that bucket. And what's going in and out there is not bees. What's going in and out there are yellow jackets. Yellow jackets are wasps. And they are very, very prevalent at this time of year. They tend to take over rodent burrows. Now, I don't know that location there on the Parkway. Maybe a chipmunk would have a burrow there. Well, actually, it might be one of multiple tunnel exits that a chipmunk would dig. But the yellow jackets will find a pre-dug hole like that, or if they're in the ground, they can find a pre-existing opening. If you have a gap in the eaves of your house, I know I had a little gap by my door that they tried to get into one time. A little bit of caulk pushed them away and they found someplace else to live. But yellow jackets, their colony has been growing ever since the queen started laying eggs back in, let's say May. And her workers are now going out and all summer long they've been bringing back food for the growing larvae. That food is usually some type of insect that they'll chew up and feed to the growing larvae that are down there in that hole. Well, we're getting to the end of their season, so the queen is less productive. She's making fewer larvae, and these guys are having a kind of a shift in their job. This is the time of year when we see them at our picnics, if we're allowed to do picnics. They're the things that are picking little pieces off of our hamburger. They're also very, very attracted to sweet things like sugary pop or sweet tea. They like beer. And these are the things that people are getting stung by now. and you'll hear about it now. Until we have a hard frost, you're going to be hearing about people, oh, I got stung by a bee, or oh, I stepped on a bee's nest. And the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me that that sidewalk said bees. So I actually went back with some sidewalk chalk, crossed it off, crossed out bees, and I wrote wasps. So if you happen to be walking over on 8th Street and you think, what kind of goofball is, you know, identifying sidewalk chalk insect identification, that would be me. I'm correcting people's misperceptions. But anyway, this picture here, I took this was at Scarecrow Fest a couple of years ago. And I heard some murmuring going on, and people were like, oh, that's such a cool statue made out of corn shocks, but stay away because look, this is the lady's lips. Her whole head was made out of birdseed. So I think it was supposed to, be an attractant to birds, but they used, I don't know, this is some kind of dried fruit, and the wasps, the yellow jackets, were just going nuts. So if you've got a crabapple tree in your yard, if you've got an American plum tree, or actually really any kind of fruit tree that might be dropping fruits as we get now into September and the rest of fall, be real careful because these guys are out there, and you might not have a neighbor that's going to draw an arrow on the sidewalk for you. Just a little warning. These guys are very, very active right now. So I thought we'd have a little bit of fun. This is an email I got. This is a fellow who we correspond fairly, well, I shouldn't say fairly often, but when he writes me, we usually have an animated exchange that goes on for a while. So he lives over in Geneva in Fisher Farms, and he walks his dogs every day. And his initial emails were about what he perceived as a lack of birds. And he's worried, just Mary, like you were talking about a lack of insects, he's worried that we're losing our birds too. And we are, but that's another topic for another time. If you notice that you're not seeing or hearing as many birds as you normally do right now, part of what's playing into that perception is that they are kind of taking a breather right now. Most of the birds in our area are just about done raising their young, and this is an important time for them to just kind of take a breather, molt. They got to get some new feathers on so they can either migrate for the winter or survive our cold temperatures in the winter. We see a lot of ratty looking birds right now too as they go through that molt. They're not at their prettiest right now. But it takes a lot of energy to grow new feathers, so they're not quite as active. They're not breeding right now, so they're not singing every morning. And some people were telling me how they were so glad the robin had finally gotten quiet because it was singing at 4 a.m., waking them up. But it's not that they've gone away completely, they're just taking a breather. So that was his initial email. And he had told me, how many birds he had been counting. But I got a kick out of his description here. So keep in mind, this is Fisher Farms, which is on the west side of Geneva, kind of behind Geneva Commons. He was out with his dogs. He's got an energetic cattle dogs. And so he was running along with them. As I dashed by the main Fisher Farms pond again, near the same place I saw the Dunlin from the previous email, I thought I saw another one until it flew a few yards away. Now put your thinking caps on. We're going to see if we can figure out what he's talking about here. It had the same dark brownish coloring. A Dunlin, by the way, is a shorebird. So picture a brownish bird, longish legs. I quickly noticed that the beak was thinner and about half the length. When it flew and re-landed, it displayed a kind of neck mohawk that made me think it was a variety of kingfisher. But when I checked my field guide, it was clearly not that. The best description I can provide is that it looked like a half to 1/3 size cormorant with those flaring head and neck feathers. Any clue as to what I saw? So that's quite a description. So let's think about this. Here's a kingfisher. Here's a cormorant. Any ideas? And you guys can unmute or you can chat, share your ideas.
Is it heron?
What was that? Did I hear heron?
That's what I said, yeah.
Well, pretty sure what it was a juvenile black-crowned night heron. The reason I'm thinking this, so Fisher Farms is at it's the west end of Geneva. If you're ever over in that area, you might be able to picture the intersection of Peck and Kesslinger roads. There's a big white church, I think it's called Chapel Street Church there now, on the northeast corner. The southwest corner goes, the county animal control facility is down there. The southeast corner has a retention pond. And when I sit there at the stoplight, I'll often look down and I'll see sometimes heron or an egret perched in a tree by there. But I've also seen black-crowned night herons sitting on the grate, the inlet grate, where the water flows into that retention pond. So I'm pretty sure this is what he saw. So I sent him this picture. This was just a Google image grab. And I had him look it up. And he said, yeah, that's what it was. So black-crowned night herons, I believe they still have the status of endangered. They're either threatened or endangered here in Illinois. And I think we have Fermilab to thank for the population that we have around here. We see them, we'll often see them too by the Batavia Dam, the North Batavia Dam, the Challenge Dam in downtown Batavia. But they seem to be spreading out a little bit farther, and I'm wondering if they must have been reproducing near this Fisher Farms pond this past year, which is a neat sign that a bird that was considered rare for this area is starting to expand its breeding territory. So we're just about out of time. I wanted to give you a heads up for next week before we open up for questions and comments. Next week, just like I said, wasps are everywhere. Spiders are everywhere too. I think I got a neat email today that I'll share with you next week about a spider experience. We're gonna take a look next week specifically at the grass spiders. These are the spiders that make those really thick, sometimes you can't even see through them, webs that are on your bushes. They might be in your grass, hence the name. A lot of times they'll be cozied up in a corner, say, you know, if your house comes to an L, or if you've got a deck that's got something that they can suspend their web on. But they're really interesting spiders, somewhat misunderstood, but we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to see what the chimney swifts are up to. We're going to revisit that topic of snapping turtles. And of course, we'll have whatever happens in the next week to report on as well. But last week, remember how I said, some of you had asked what's going to happen because we only had listed good-natured hours through August. If you haven't had enough and you want to come back, we have moved our registration to an outside source called Ticketly. I think what I'll do is email everyone who's on the meeting tonight. I'll email you this registration link. It's a little bit simpler than our park district. I know some of you had kind of a hard time navigating through our family information form and all these different things to get signed up. But I will email this link to you because that registration link will be live starting actually starting right now. So just wanted to make mention of that before we signed off. And with that, I'm gonna stop the share and I'll see, does anybody have any, oh, we got a couple of chats here, okay. thanks, Mary, for that. We'll talk about the National Geographic article next week. You'll miss them when they're gone. Appreciate that. Anybody else have any questions or comments or anything else? Everybody having a good week? Staying cool, hopefully. I really appreciate you spending time with me. And tech support puppy, who actually did pretty good tonight. He's sleeping on my feet. The Republican National Convention is on this. Last week was the Democrats. This week is the Republicans. We're having an exciting time coming up this fall. So hopefully we can all gather together again next Tuesday.
Great, thanks.
All right, any questions?
Thanks, Pam.
All right. Great to see everybody.
Pam,
Good night.
Pam, are green herons common around here, I guess?
Green herons, you know, they have certain, they like quieter. In fact, it's funny you say green herons. I was just thinking about them. I was at Delnor Woods again this week, and that front pond you could oftentimes find a green heron kind of skulking along. They need to fish where they can find small fish and where the water isn't super deep or moving super fast. But now that we have that aerator at Delnor Woods, I'm not sure if we'll see them in the front pond. They may move to a different pond. I've also seen them over at Pearson Creek Park on the lagoon side, not the creek side, but the lagoon side up there. So yeah, I still am excited to see one. It's not like you see them everywhere.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Oh, sure. Anybody else? With that, hope to see you again real soon. Have a good night, everybody.
You too, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah.
Thank you.